Hello, everyone. Welcome to Trust and Safety Across Industries. My name is Charlotte Wilner. I am Executive Director at the Trust and Safety Professional Association, and I was delighted to be asked to moderate this session. Who knows what could happen with me as a moderator, right? We're going to find out. With me, I am so happy to say I have three really storied and interesting professionals in the field. We have Laura Higgins from Roblox, we have David Brown from the Meet Group, and we have Tracy Elizabeth from TikTok, all here with us today to talk about trust and safety across industries. Folks, I'm wondering if I could ask you to give just a brief introduction of who you are and what led you to be on this panel today. Let's start, let's go alphabetically. Let's go with David.
Sounds good, thanks. I'm David Brown. I'm 25 years into my career working for various internet services. I started in the 90s at the internet's first retailer, cdnow.com, selling CDs and DVDs and whatnot on the internet. Spent a couple of years after that running operations for Pennsylvania's first online school. And then in 2006, I got involved in trust and safety. I was recruited by the myyearbook.com startup to lead the safety team at the company's inception.
Amazing. Let's go next to Laura.
Thanks, Charlotte. So I'm Laura Higgins. I'm the Director of Community Safety and Civility at Roblox. I've been there for nearly 3.5 years now, and building out all of the civility and education programs for the community. Prior to that, I was operations manager at the UK Safer Internet Centre, and I was there for about 9 years, where I set up several helplines, supporting people who had online harms and needed help with mediation with industry partners. And so through that, I built really strong relationships with a lot of the tech companies, working with people, sitting on advisory boards of people like Twitter and Snapchat, and later Roblox, which is where my journey with them actually began. But yeah, I go way back in safeguarding and online safeguarding. So delighted to be here now.
Great. And finally, Tracy.
Hey there, I'm Tracy Elizabeth, and I am the head of policy for the Americas at TikTok. I oversee issues like minor safety, harassment and bullying, integrity and authenticity, and several others. I started my career as an elementary school teacher, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade literacy. Yeah, and in that capacity, it was a lot of fun, but in that capacity, I learned all about the different ways that we could use media to promote academic and social wellness in kids. So I ended up going back to study. I have a master's in prevention science, and then my doctorate in adolescent development and media from Harvard University. I directed Harvard's Children's Media Lab for years, and then jumped from academia into tech and worked on leading the kids and family content metadata for Netflix, helped Netflix establish their global maturity ratings department, and then had the opportunity to join TikTok a little bit over 2 years ago now. I first started as the minor safety global policy lead and now have expanded into several other issue categories.
Something I already love about this panel is I feel like often the speaker bios, not that they aren't important, but those can be kind of like, yeah, right. But what I love about the bios we just heard from the three of you is you all came from really different places and have arrived in this space where now we're going to have this conversation together. And the whole theme of the panel is, well, there are different types of platforms. There's nuances in the way that we address things through policy, through the ways we design our systems. And like, what better way to start than sort of looking at each of your journeys and saying, yeah, actually, that's real different. I got here by being an English major, which is like, we can talk about that origin story sometime. I'd love to jump into why we're all here, trust and safety across industries. My first question is, as we think about issue verticals, so bullying and harassment, hate speech and radicalization, adult nudity, sexual activity, minor safety, all examples there. All platforms have some kind of policy in place to action content that violates these policies. And that can include considerations towards the age of your audience, the purpose of your platform. And if we look at one of those verticals, say bullying and harassment, seems like a good example to talk about with this group, with this set of experiences. What are some safety considerations you have in place to detect and action content that violates community standards there?
If I could take the first crack at that one, the first thing that comes to mind when operating the dating and meet new people apps that we are is that you have to be proactive. It can't just be reactive. An example, since we're talking about bullying here, if the very first message that one user attempts to send to another user is, "You're ugly," we need to detect that, we need to understand that, and we need to not deliver it to the recipient. What's the point in delivering that to the recipient? It's just going to hurt them. So that proactive analysis, understanding the moment a piece of content is received, what it is, whether or not it should be published, and making and implementing those decisions. And the last piece I'll include with that, keeping proactive, is you got to holistically look at the user base and try to find the people who are repeat offenders with the behavior like I described, and find those people and remove them, even if their messages never make it to someone's inbox.
I'd love to just add on there that a lot of what we think about is how can we empower our users at TikTok to manage and control their own media experiences. So one thing that I'm really proud of is all of the resources that we post, right? So like if you go to TikTok.com or go to our safety center, you'll see this bullying and prevention guide. And sometimes I think it starts with just helping folks understand what exactly is bullying, right? What is harassment? And I think that there are lots of people out there who might not actually be aware if they are either perpetuating that type of behavior or are the recipients of that type of behavior. So one concrete step is just going towards like, okay, these are the types of bullying that exists. And here's how you can learn more, either as an individual or as a parent who's thinking about their teen in the digital space. And then beyond that, I think it's very important that we think about what are the tools that we can empower our communities with in order to help them say something when an experience happens that's uncomfortable, or set up their accounts in ways that are most appropriate for them as individuals. So again, as an example, for TikTok, you can choose who can comment on my video, and even at a unique video basis, right? Like who can comment on this video? Friends, nobody, everybody. And then differently, if there's ways in which like in the app, we try to make it very user intuitive that you can report things that make you uncomfortable and articulate why. And I think every little bit of that user empowerment, not only does it help communities protect themselves, but it also then helps us protect them as well.
Totally agree with everything that's been said. I think coming in as potentially the platform that has the youngest demographic, or at least a lot of our population, we have different ways of managing these sorts of topics. So as everyone's aware, Roblox, traditionally had lots and lots of really young kids. Really, it was the starting point for a lot of them going into their online journey. So we wanted to make sure that we gave them a really safe place to explore and create and sort of figure out who they wanted to be in these online spaces. But with that, I think we had much more stringent rules and much more strict filtering, for example, than a lot of other platforms. So for us, to your point around different audiences. So for example, we've done a lot of work around supporting parents to be able to support their kids. So whether it be giving them the tools where they can have, restricted access to certain games, or turning off chat just while children are really young, and then helping them to understand how to talk to their kids, and us giving advice to them as well around what's acceptable, what's not, being very clear around the community standards and expectations right from the off, I think is really important. And then as kids build resilience but also learn those digital skills that are so essential, giving them a little bit more freedom to kind of test things out on the platform. Obviously, we still have very strict rules on the platform. We offer all of those usual tools you would expect around reporting and blocking and encouraging. But I think for us, actually, education around all of this for all of our audiences is one of the key things, as well as tackling online harmful behaviors and sort of being, moderating in that sense.
Can I just follow up a little bit more with that?
Absolutely. You go for
I'm
it.
a mom of a young girl. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and she is really interested in Roblox. And so I've been thinking about what are all of the best practices that I share with the world, right? And encourage others to do, and families and caregivers when they're trying to protect their kids and teens in digital spaces. And I find myself now as a mom, then emulating those practices, right? So one thing I always encourage folks is like, know the rules and know the tools. So I personally set myself up a Roblox account, right? I play Roblox. I'm trying to figure out like, what do we do here? Like, how does it work? What can I do? And the same thing when I tell folks about TikTok, I'm like, please, parents, caregivers, set up a TikTok account, learn what it's all about, figure out its settings, figure out how you can adjust them for yourself, your kid, you know, all of that. So I do encourage folks always to just be really familiar with whatever app it is, or digital space, digital environment, because, you know, at this point, we're getting really innovative and creative with our technology. Then I encourage families to just get to know what those spaces have to offer.
And that's amazing to hear, and thank you, that's my job. So yeah, I couldn't give any better advice around that. And the thing is, especially when you've got a slightly younger family, it's fun. It's a really lovely thing to do together. Your kids really appreciate, even if you're terrible at a game, the fact that you're sitting down and doing it with them, and they can show you what they like, what they don't like, those teachable moments within that, as well as being familiar with the tools. It's amazing. So when we're thinking about bullying and harassment, it's a way to start a conversation, because you might see it play out in real life, and then you can have that conversation. So yeah, it's so valuable. And as I say, you know, just as a bonding moment, it's a really wonderful thing to do. So I might meet you there at some point, Tracy. Game on.
The number of times I've been called a noob by my 6-year-old.
I feel like there's a certain age where it's not even in spite of you being bad at the game. It's like you are bad at the game, and that's what they like about it. Like that you are bad at the game. They're like, oh yeah, that's the bonding experience for certainly my 6-year-old. I have loved listening to just the different types of techniques and remediations we're all talking about. And something that comes a lot in my work at TSPA is people will say like, all right, we can try all these different remediations, but fundamentally, like what works, right? Like what is the metric you can look at that demonstrates, and in fact, these things are effective, or maybe they're less effective. We need to try something else. Thinking about that sort of data-oriented question, what are some of the metrics that you can look at to inform your policies, inform sort of what you consider to be best practices?
On Roblox, we have millions of different experiences. It's all user generated. So one of the things is if people are not having a good time, they just don't play that game or that experience. So retention is like the biggest clue to what's going on within that experience. So of course we have ways of measuring internally certain behaviors, monitoring that and seeing where we might have to adjust moderation practices or policy. But actually that biggest thing of, that's interesting, that's perhaps not so civil, you know, that's my area of interest, is what's going on in that particular experience is sometimes a place where we might want to go and put a little bit more attention on what's happening within there. So yeah, that's just a really big catch-all for us. Generally, the more popular they are and the stickier they are in terms of bringing your friends in and bringing your community, it's a really good sign that generally things are working out quite healthily and it's a positive place for people to hang out.
I may have an equally broad response to that. You know, data that we look at to guide policy making, user feedback is critical, especially including users appealing to being moderated. Okay, if a user has their image declined by our review team, if they have their live stream ended for being inappropriate, they'll often lodge a complaint with our safety team, appeal the moderation decision. So we internally look at the content types that we're rejecting. Maybe it's a new fashion trend that we need to adjust our image standards for. Maybe there's a new trend of behavior in video that we should be allowing. So we look we look very carefully at what we censor and what our users say in response to being censored.
I want so many more details about the fashion trends. Like, hold up, what? For another time. But Tracy, you were getting ready to weigh in, I think.
Well, it was just definitely one of, again, like +1, the user report is so important, and to make sure that users have the tools that are intuitive and easy to use in order to report out, and then we're able to investigate and look into whatever it is that they've reported. But additionally, and I am an academic myself, so I'm always going to be pro-academic, but I like to consult with external experts and scholars who are subject matter experts in whatever the very specific phenomenon is that we want to better understand or look into. So subject matter expertise. We also have our advisory council where we bring gray area cases and also just cases that are important and near and dear to our hearts to the council to discuss like what their advice and guidance is. And there's all sorts of different ways that we work with our data science teams to consider like how we can always like learn more and do better. And for me, I feel like just like we're always learning about policies, I think that we can push ourselves to always learn about what are the new metrics or ways in which we can be creative with understanding data that are available.
That actually brings me really well to my next question. I think it is important, of course, to focus on the data and the metrics. Those are like some grounding principles, but like also like the numbers alone aren't what runs a healthy community. It's not all just like the tech. It's not all just like moderation technology. It's also how you think about your community and community health. It's about sort of the resources you're developing for the community that you envision and you're trying to build. So my question is, thinking about the unique nature of your platform, and each one of your platforms is actually pretty different from each other, right? What are some of the sort of tools or safeguards that you put in place beyond moderation, beyond reporting tools that help build that healthy community that you're striving to create?
We take the first crack at that one. The first thing that comes to mind is a clear statement of expectations. So often terms of service or privacy policy or whatever is a lot of legalese and not that easy to read. We've gone out of our way to create a content and conduct policy that is very easy to read and very easy to understand. So it's important to set expectations in a way that's easy for the user base to understand. And then with that, the second point is consistent application of the standards and policies. If you have a policy banning a particular content type, you have to be vigilant with making sure that that content type is not seen on your platform. You can't make mistakes. Users will wonder, how come that person can post that content type, but I can't? So that even and consistent and ongoing application. And I'll share this third one, last item, and it's particularly relevant to our dating services. We have every user go through what we call a safety pledge every 90 days. So they open the app and a screen comes up and it says, okay, we're going to go through the safety pledge. And you have to say, I pledge. So the first one is, I will meet people in public places and tell others where I go. I pledge. The next one says, I will not give money to strangers. I pledge. And we have just a couple basic high-level things that we recommend to users to stay safe, and every 90 days we bring them through those reminders to help keep top of mind what they need to know to use a dating app safely.
From a developmental psychology perspective, and for what it's worth, I love the I pledge idea. I think it's a good way to like co-create safety and community, and put accountability. Not just like within the product, but also within the users of the product. From a developmental psychology perspective, I think a lot about, and Laura, you probably appreciate this because I know you've got a lot of young people on Roblox, but we think about how teens, there's a difference between early teens and late teens. So all sorts of different psychologists, so psychological theories will tell you how there's this transition from early adolescence into late adolescence. And so the features at TikTok are specifically designed to honor how there are those differences between the early teens and the late teens. So we have, just as an example, all accounts for our early teens are set to private by default. Those teens are not allowed access to direct messaging. And these are very deliberate decisions rooted in psychology and human development, because we know that it's in the best interest of youth to release those guardrails as they mature and get closer into adulthood. So those are just some ways that we design with an eye towards youth safety. And what I also appreciate so much about that is that human development is agnostic of culture. So one thing is like the way that the brain grows and the way teens think, behave, react, etc. While there might be different cultural nuances in what they're experiencing, their brain still tends to develop with like the judgment taking, perspective taking, risk taking capacities at relatively the same stages. So that's just like a universal approach to design. And then additionally, we have this feature, it's called family pairing. And I love family pairing because it's this way when caregivers come to me and like, what can I do to just make sure that my teen is having an experience that I feel comfortable with? I'm like, I know what you can do. You can link your account with your teen's account, and then you on behalf of your teen can manage what's going on there. So those are just other examples of features, like in product gestures of care and empathy for how we want to make sure to empower users. And I'd love to see more and more of that, and also innovate on a regular basis to see how we can continue to empower families like that.
For us, so I head up the civility project, and so everything we're talking about in this discussion really it sits under that. So it's about that education, the building the resilience, the teaching empathy and kindness and collaboration and problem solving and conflict resolution and all of those little things that you wouldn't normally expect would be kind of talked about in terms of, you know, a games platform essentially, but it is really, really important that, you know, people need to feel confident in themselves and others and know how to have those positive interactions. So we do that by working with a lot of safety partners and subject experts is one thing. You know, we know what we know, but actually we want to be authentic in what we're talking about. So things like mental health and well-being, we all know this huge impact the last few years has had, particularly on young people and teenagers. Within a platform, there's only so much we can do to support that, but actually then trying to go that little bit further and making sure that they can get access to support if they need it. Those sorts of things I think is really important. Listening to the community is really, really vital to us. I know we've touched on that. So whether sometimes that might be by low-level research projects, I have a sounding board who I just hang out with on Discord, and they talk to me about all sorts of things. It helps us understand what their whole online life is like. We can kind of see what's happening in Roblox, and as it is, as we said, quite strict in terms of what they can and can't do. Actually, our duty of care is about that whole community, even when they're off the platform. So what is it like for them when they're on all of these other platforms? What's really going on? And actually some of the things that they share with us, it can be really quite upsetting to hear. You know, they are talking about self-harm concerns, and they are talking about, you know, relationship issues and those sorts of things, but that is actually impacting them. And that's also then going to impact the way they behave when they're on the platform. So for us to understand that and get a feel for where the community's at helps us then to be able to give them the best support that we possibly can. And then also, you know, things like thinking about how we then amplify the messages. You know, we know it's hard to reach families. Sometimes people are really busy. They don't necessarily have time to be going onto a website to read stuff. So for us to both make sure we're out there as much as possible, but working with all of those different organizations, whether they be parenting orgs, education orgs, safety organizations, to just keep repeating the messages, making sure the tools are easy to access, all of those things, I think is a really helpful way. And, you know, there's lots of these great organizations bringing tech together, and actually us all sharing our best practices, I think is really helpful in terms of it makes all of us better. There, you know, it helps us all reflect on what our healthy communities look like. So yeah, you know, the old thing, it takes a village. It really does.
And you mentioned all these great organizations out there, and I'm like, ooh, like who, right? Because a big part of our job, my job really, as well as our program manager, at TSBA is like reading the research and finding the research and sort of understanding like who is out there thinking about these issues, both at platforms and outside of platforms, and how can we be sort of best integrating that information, sort of metabolizing it for our community of professionals and absorbing it ourselves so that it becomes part of what we're thinking about in the way that we work. I'd love to ask the group, and Laura, certainly you, because you were like, oh, we work with all these organizations. I'm like, let's hear it. But, more broadly, all these like policy updates, white papers, anything else that like I can find to help me learn and grow in this space is what I'm interested in. I bet you all feel the same way. Like, are there platforms that you think are writing some really interesting policy? I mean, obviously your own, of course, you can talk about that, but others, are there any writers or that you listen to, podcasters or specific podcast episodes, academic research? Obviously, we have some people with academic background. Like, what is on your reading list in your earphones that you can recommend to other professionals or to interested people?
If I can go first. So
go for it.
Stuff that's coming out of the Fair Play Alliance, which is a consortium of games industry and developers who work together. I think we have well over 200 members now. I'm on the executive committee, so it is a bit of a shout out. However, actually, again, it's that whole community thing. So it's not just a few people creating these resources, it's this shared collective experience and people bringing out things. And so there's webinars and podcasts and white papers and some really fantastic resources have come out, framework for managing disruptive behavior. And these things are all free for people to use on their platforms. And so that's been really exciting for me to be part of and then to be able to share and amplify. Of course, Oasis Consortium are creating some really fantastic resources. And again, it's, regularly offering support to platforms because we all need to learn, we all need to share. And a lot of stuff that's coming out of the Oxford Internet Institute, I find really balanced. It's, we look at, there's a lot of research out there and some of it's a little contradictory. So I think, the stuff that comes out of there is really well peer reviewed, very well respected, very balanced. And so certainly we found that helpful. One of our goals is to try to, when we're talking particularly to parents, is to give them evidence-based, factual feedback on things. And so having those things to lean on can be really, really valuable sometimes.
My rule of thumb is to, even though I'm very opinionated, I don't come to work with opinions. I come to the table with informed perspectives, right? It's like everything that we advise, because it's so important and can have such a deep impact on communities, we have this extra layer of responsibility to be right? And so I think a lot about peer-reviewed research, because again, I'm an academic, and one thing that I find pretty great is Google Scholar. I don't know if you all use it much, but like instead of the regular Google search bar, you just like go to the Google Scholar bar. If anybody, like, please spread the word, just go to Google Scholar instead and type in whatever topic. And for me, that's been so helpful because a lot of the peer-reviewed articles that you'll find in Google Scholar are publicly available. The PDF is there. And so given we're juggling so many different topics, it's hard for me to really anticipate in any given week what specifically we may want to look at. So one place I go to is Google Scholar regularly, in addition to the external experts, depending on the subject that we're trying to learn from. I'm also really excited and interested by the new online journal of trust and safety. It's like, that's a new peer-reviewed online journal all about trust and safety, right? All of these issues. And so I think, there's only like 1 or 2 issues out so far. And what a brilliant opportunity for our field to start to bring knowledge to each other. So I'm really excited about that as well.
Beyond the sources that are already mentioned, a couple things I look at are the blog of Thorn, as well as of NCMEC. They publish interesting information, results, case studies, etc. Beyond Thorn and NCMEC, there are 2 people that I've been interested in hearing from. One is Dr. Hani Farid over at Berkeley. He worked with us at Thorn in helping to build an algorithm that can detect potential harm to minors. He's got a lot of great things to say. I'll listen to anything or read anything that he publishes. And just last week, for the first time, I read a little bit of the man's name is Yashan Wong. He was the CEO of Reddit for a little while. And last week he posted a fascinating thread about Elon Musk and Twitter and why Elon's vision might not realistically be possible. Fascinating hearing from Yashan on that recently.
I would also love to just throw in the Digital Wellness Lab. We're one of the founding members there, and actually as that project, which is run by Boston Children's Hospital and Harvard, again, it comes from evidence-based advice for parents, and it literally covers some of those things that we see, that there's just so much scaremongering in the media and parents don't really know where to go and things are frightening for them. This is really practical, helpful advice from medical professionals who work with children and adolescents all day, every day. And it's everything from, you know, how harmful is screen time, those big topics, but they actually have a wonderful repository of research on there as well. So if you want to go dig, there's so much good stuff on there.
I have to plus one the Digital Wellness Lab. We also are partnering with them, and they're so instrumentally helpful because not only do they have the repository of peer-reviewed, highly rigorous research, but also we can call them on a dime with any topic and say, we just want to learn a little bit more about this. So they've been really fantastic to help educate us on all sorts of different topics.
This is great. I wish this were the entire panel, because I'm like, okay. And another thing, have you heard about, I know I'm not a panelist, but I will just plus one, Yashan Wong's threads on content moderation in general are excellent. I had the great privilege of working with him at Facebook way back in the day, but he of course did a stint as CEO of Reddit, which really puts you through it, I'd say.
Oh, I'm sure.
But he has this wonderful theory about what he calls omega events. And it's basically like, well, you create these policies and you ground them in principles, and those work great until there's a thing that happens, because humans are endlessly inventive, where it makes you challenge all your priors, and you got to go back and figure out, okay, well, now that we know that, how do we approach this, right? So very thoughtful. Also want to plus one, the Journal of Online Trust and Safety, which Tracy, you mentioned. They are, for full disclosure, I am on their editorial board, and we are through our the Trust and Safety Foundation partnering with them on a research conference at the end of September over at Stanford. But that is a really interesting endeavor because it's this sort of rapid, not quite real time, but is almost as real time as it can get sometimes in academia, sort of publishing schedule. So they really are attracting these articles of like, okay, this is happening right now. We can get this information, sooner rather than later. And it sounds like that's what's wonderful about the Digital Wellness Lab is you can just like phone them up. They're like, yeah, listen, here's the deal. And love to have a bat phone, it's critical. I want to be sure we're like keeping the time. So we're going to keep moving. I got 2 questions left for you as a group. Question 1 is looking ahead at Web3 and the metaverse and all of these, sort of new realities for us in this field. What do you think are some topics that should be top of mind for trust and safety as platforms look at that sort of next generation of online experiences?
One of the first thing that comes to mind for me is what is the next generation of tech going to do to trust and safety? I'm increasingly concerned about end-to-end encryption. I know there are some communication services that do this, and that could make trust and safety work pretty challenging. I talked earlier about programmatically finding users that are engaging in hate speech or bullying in their messages. We wouldn't be able to discover that, or spam, or content harmful to minors. So I hope that end-to-end encryption doesn't become the expectation or the norm, so that we can continue to help filter content and know what's bad and remove it. Another thing that comes to mind, I think it's under GDPR, there's a right to erasure. People have the right to have all of their data deleted. I believe I remember hearing you have several days from the time of the request, but we've already had a little bit of difficulty with it. We've had people create profiles, send out a lot of messages, make a mess, and then delete their profile and get rid of everything in a manner that our safety team can't dig into it and investigate. So there's some challenges with that. There can be some regulations that have good intentions, but cause some difficulty for us operators.
One size doesn't fit all, right? And as we expand and innovate in these digital spaces like the metaverse, I really want to better understand how these spaces will affect the cognitive psychology and social development of little kids, bigger kids, teenagers, grown-ups. I think that we still have a lot to learn, and a significant responsibility as a united industry and in interdisciplinary industries to get even more educated and to tread lightly and responsibly. I also think a lot about how not all content, we all have content, right, that doesn't necessarily, or we have experiences that don't violate our community guidelines. And what we know is that even for content like on TikTok that doesn't violate a community guideline, some video may not be comfortable for one person, but is perfectly comfortable for another. And so how are there ways that we can start to classify or organize our content based on users' comfort or their age appropriateness? So I think a lot about film and television and gaming ratings. What can we borrow from those best practices? And how can we empower our communities with even more tools in all of these digital spaces to opt in with informed consent for the experience that's most comfortable? I don't really love appropriate. I think appropriate is kind of a patronizing concept. I think that comfortable is a little bit, I'm more comfortable with comfortable, because I believe that it's up to the parent or the individual to decide for themselves what is or is not appropriate. And it's our responsibility to give them the information and tools to be able to meaningfully make those choices in their different digital experiences. So I'd love to see more innovation when it comes to classifying content based on comfort levels or comfort zones.
Tracy, you're speaking my language completely. And yes, watch this space on Roblox. Some exciting things coming this year. Because exactly that, we now have such an aging up community. Over half the people on the platform are now over 13. We still have the 8, 9, and 10-year-olds. We have adults who are, running businesses and so on. And we want everybody to be able to have that safe and wholesome experience when they're on the platform. So we need much, much more granularity and control for people. And I'm so with you around this is not appropriateness. Who are we to say what's appropriate for? And that tweens a 13-year-old, they are so different. So to being able to offer them that personalized experience that's right for them and their family is so important. I think I'll try and keep this short. I know we're running out of time. Roblox is quite often talked about in relation to the metaverse. It's something we have been involved in for a very long time. Our founder, Dave, talks about it as human co-experience. And I think that's a really good way of looking at it. It's about people being able to be involved in these, yes, immersive 3D experiences with friends, and going from, whether it be shopping to an entertainment experience, to work, to play, to creating something, all of those things. But at the moment, the media is not helping us. They are all throwing out this metaverse, and it's very muddled. And particularly from parents, we're hearing that they're very anxious. They don't know whether it's VR, is it Bitcoin, is it NFTs? I don't want my children involved in all of this stuff. I'm really scared. And so I think this, for all of us to be very clear what we're talking about when we say the metaverse. What does it mean for us? For us, it is the Roblox metaverse. We're not talking about your kids going from platform to platform and, all of those sorts of things. So I think we all need to be very careful about how we talk about it, reassuring so that people understand and can build trust in it. And also for us to be doing that back end, as you say, evolving, making sure that our practices are appropriate and safe, and that we that's the old thing. It's still safety by design. This is just the new iteration. We're still trying to project what's going to be suitable in 5 years' time, and trying to make sure we have everything in place now because it's already happening.
That's great. In the short time we have remaining, my last question, and this is one we could do an entire other panel on, so we're going to keep it real brief. it's about the way you talk about trust and safety with your colleagues and with the people who work at your company. Trust and safety, as you all know, takes work across many different teams. It's not just like one team that's like, we're trust and safety, we'll take care of it, and everybody else, you're off the hook. What is, you would say, sort of the most effective step that you have taken to educate and empower the teams at your company about the value of trust and safety and why it's important to create that safe user experience?
We do an orientation and onboarding for every single new employee where we have them meet with the leadership of our trust and safety team for 60 minutes, where we educate them on what we do, why we do it, the importance of doing it, some of the metrics related to the outcomes. But this education for everybody on the way in to teach them all about trust and safety and the importance of it has been an important program for us.
Another message that we send out regularly is that there's so many reasons for trust and safety. And one of the core reasons is that we want to uplift and empower voices and communities, right? And so in order to provide spaces for creativity, for authenticity, and for all of us to learn from each other and learn with each other, we need to make sure that those are places that are psychologically safe, right? And provide all sorts of other safety measures, because we all know that the best way to flourish as an individual and to share and to care is to be in a place where you don't feel threatened. So a lot of it is in the spirit of creativity, sharing, collaboration, learning, all of that. And that seems to make a lot of sense to folks, and helps to put a little bit of the joy and love back into what can oftentimes be very heavy. And trust and safety topics are tough, and they're owed a lot of respect, and they carry a lot of gravity. So to be able to remind folks of this is in the spirit of creativity, collaboration, communication is incredibly empowering and motivating for teams, I've noticed.
For us, we work really cross-functionally. So we have, meetings. There's a particular group that get together every fortnight to look at particular policy issues. And sometimes it's because there's been a real world issue, and we come together to decide, okay, this is where we're going to be in terms of our policy, in terms of our moderation practice. Do we need to make product changes? And it literally has representation from every team, and it all gets fed back. And then there'll be kind of fallout work from that, where we go, okay, so we've made these top level decisions, now let's go and unpick it. And so that collaboration is so helpful, because you really do get to listen to each other's viewpoints, but it is led by trust and safety. So that's one of the examples. The other one really comes from my side of things, which is, sometimes people who are on the much more kind of technical side of things with a big platform and keeping things going, they can be a little distant sometimes from actually the users on the other end. They're really proud of what we're doing, but they may not understand that the thing they're working on, the impact it actually has on people. So collecting those case studies, hearing those stories, getting out the bit I did go to the community, but then to be able to say, some of the stories we heard, particularly through lockdown, where people were like, you literally saved my life. I couldn't have had contact with my family, my friends. Being able to reflect that back to the teams gives them that pride, that investment. They see why the things they're doing are so important, and it just keeps them kind of really involved in the whole process. So it's really important that, as I say, that kind of amplification of messages is both external but also internal.
I love that that's sort of our closing story, because it really reminds us that this isn't like an exercise in theory, right? Like this is real lives that are being impacted by the decisions that our teams make, the choices that we make, the way that we work, together within companies and, sort of outside the bonds of companies, right? As professionals. So real delight to spend time with all of you today. Wish we could keep having this conversation, but we've got to turn people back into, I guess, the rest of this summit. So thank you so much to Tracy Elizabeth, to Laura Higgins, and to, I'm going to say Dave, and I realize, oh no, it's Dave Brown, right? Yeah, okay. For being here with us today. Thank you also to the Spectrum team for putting this all together. Really good to see you all.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Charlotte. It was lovely to be talking with all of you. Thank you.